Welcome to my channel, Magnus here, and I like to talk about nostalgic games that come back to life, and of course gaming in general. So if you're new, consider subscribing. And today we're talking about video games and movies. Now I'm not talking about video game adaptations into movies or video games adapted into TV shows. I'm talking about when movie characters play video games in their movies. And this is something that has been a little bit cringe in my opinion. Now first, let me tell you a little bit of background before we begin to talk about this subject. Now I, on the side, love to film either short movies or music videos or take clients to record whatever they might need. Basically, I love to talk about video. And I have a camera channel also on YouTube. You can go ahead and subscribe to that. I'll leave a link down below. But the reason I mention that is because that makes me a little bit of an expert when it comes to anything basically on a storytelling perspective in order to entertain an audience. Now with that said, why is it so hard to get right when filming characters playing video games on screen? Now there's a couple of behind the scenes things that I want to touch on, but first, how do we feel when we're watching games that we're familiar with on screen in a movie? Well, there's a couple of phases that I can relate to, and I ask if you feel the same way. But first, I'm excited to see that characters are playing a video game that I'm familiar with. To hear the sounds, to actually see it in the movie, it makes me relate, and then it makes me watch what they're gaming, and I'm like, oh, they're terrible, or oh, that looks pretty good. But then what pulls us away from that video gaming experience, at least for me, and let me know if you guys feel the same way, is when they hold their controller and they're just kind of like doing random movements that have nothing to do with or reflect what's going on screen. Now that, being a gaming fan, can be somewhat infuriating because we know the controls, we're familiar with the controls, especially when it's a familiar game, and then to have to deal with seeing like players or pretend players just push random buttons and make it look like they're doing something coherent, that pulls you out, and then it gets frustrated. At least it gets me frustrated. Let me know if it gets you frustrated. But why does Hollywood do that? Why do they do that? And then let's explore on how they can do it better. Now this video is inspired by Last of Us Episode 7, where the characters were playing Mortal Kombat 2. And I relatively enjoyed that scene, the fact that they were playing Mortal Kombat. And I actually think that they did it right, as opposed to other movies that may not have get it right. And as an example to that, I'm going to compare it to when Mortal Kombat was being played by two characters in The 40-Year-Old Virgin, which is a movie that's a few years old at this point. From a behind-the-scenes standpoint, when you're actually playing a game in the movie, many times the actual game is not in front of the characters that are acting for this role. So when they're acting, they're pretty much acting in front of a blank screen. Because in many cases, and as technology progresses, it's actually easier to do it live and on the spot. But you don't know if you have the rights to that game. You don't know if you're going to switch it up in post. You don't know anything that's going to happen. So in many cases, that screen is actually not reflecting the gameplay that wants to be demonstrated for the audience to view. And even if they are actually playing the game in the scene, they might not get the rights or license to be able to broadcast that, and they might have to switch the game when the movie premieres or when the show premieres. And if they do get the rights, maybe the footage and the gameplay wasn't the best that you wanted to actually portray for your audience, and maybe the studio might say, you know what, you could have fought better, here's this footage, you should use that for the scene. There's tons of things that can happen when you're actually filming that scene. But then there's this other added layer. Now when it comes to filming yourself playing video games, any intense player knows, and I've done this when filming myself playing Shenmue and trying to beat a high score in a certain game in the original Shenmue a while back on this channel. You can check that out too as well. I was actually playing Shenmue, and if you look at my face and you look at how I'm touching the controller, it's very subtle, my movements. There's not a lot of action, there's not a lot of like anything, and my face is just basically dead, just focusing on the screen. Gaming, when you're actually watching a gamer, can potentially look incredibly boring. Now if you want to show that characters are having fun playing a game, you want to show them reacting and actually enjoying themselves. And a lot of studios, especially if they grant you the license and permission to use the gameplay footage in your movie, they want you to look like you're having fun. And if you have a stone classic stone gamer face and not doing much and barely touching any buttons, the game doesn't look fun, so no one would want to buy it. So the Hollywood actors themselves have to be a little bit exaggerated and show that they're having the time of their life, almost like a gaming commercial. Now, yes, you and I, as gamers, we can understand that, dude, that's not a realistic portrayal of gaming. But what the studios want to do and what the filmmakers want to do is make the game look fun so they can use that license in their movie and actually portray that. So you'll have the actors act a bit over the top. But another thing to keep in mind when it comes to filming actors is that the actors may not be gamers. A lot of actors, at least Hollywood actors, may not even have time to play video games, let alone know what every single video game's about. So they're just going to follow the script and do what they're supposed to do for the role. And there's also directors and writers involved. So let's say the actor actually is a gaming fan and knows what it feels like to play that particular video game. The director might say, don't do it like that. I want you to be over the top. Or hit the controls as much as possible and make the controls go like wild. Although that looks unnatural to a gamer, again, the director's trying to portray a certain type of emotion. Even though us as gamers can't stand looking at that, there's a purpose. When it comes to, speaking of the controls themselves, when you're actually controlling the game, and the actor may be controlling an actual scene that reflects off of what's going on in real life, that may not translate into what gets shown on screen. So they may be told, just do random things because we're just going to throw footage on that anyway. And they have to make it a little bit more lively to show, again, the portrayal of having fun. And unfortunately, it looks fake as hell to audience members that are actual gamers, which I think is a growing community at this point. Which is why I'm going to talk about The Last of Us. Such a good show. Now, The Last of Us, they had a scene where they were playing Mortal Kombat as well, but Mortal Kombat 2, a classic. Something that I enjoy very much. Now, in Mortal Kombat 2, the characters were a little bit over the top. Like in the beginning, you could see that they were just kind of like, oh, how do you play? Just mash the buttons. And it's like, there's no way you're going to mash the buttons and do some of the moves that they were doing randomly. But what they did correctly was, rather than showing the controls and showing them hands and looking completely like disconnected from what they're actually playing, they showed the characters' reactions. It showed their faces. And I think that's the way you should show gamers when playing a game, especially if you can't control the footage. Hollywood sometimes is too obsessed with showing the fact that they're messing around with the controls, and that pulls you away. And that's something that if I'm filming a gaming scene, I'm not going to show. I'm never going to show the controls. I'll show that they have a control in their hand, and then of course put it down and then they start using it. But that's going to be off screen. I care more about the characters' reactions. And that is actually going to be a bit more authentic and not pull gamers away when it comes to filming those scenes. And that's why I think Last of Us did it correctly. It was the reactions and an added tidbit. They actually revealed how to do one of the fatalities by one of the characters saying, this is how you do it, and showed the moves. That to me is an authentic gaming experience. Somebody telling you that they know how to do the moves. They tell you how to do the moves with the, left down, left up, right, left, whatever the moves would be. Basically revealing to you exactly how to do one of the moves. And that's something that, to us gamers, it translates well from cinema to us. And it hits us right where it counts, because it's like, you know what? That comes from a gamer. That comes from a gaming fan. That comes from somebody who knows how to play the game, even though they're just actors and, playing a role. And that itself helps us to connect to those characters and feel like they're actually playing the game, even though those actors probably weren't. Actually, I could say definitely were not playing Mortal Kombat 2 right on the scene. But you don't know that because they did it and they filmed it well. And that's why I think that The Last of Us, at least when it comes to representing gaming, they not only changed the game when it comes to storytelling in a series for a video game franchise, but for these particular type of scenes where they're actually playing games, Last of Us just taught Hollywood how to do it. That's all I got to say. If you like what this was and you want to see more of this type of content, of course, when it comes to nostalgic games, and in here we mentioned both Shenmue and we mentioned Mortal Kombat, and we'll continue to mention games like that, you leave a comment down below and let me know what else you'd like to see. And the greatest thing you could do is make my day when you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.